Hi, so I'm Aurelia Noel. I'm Global Head of Transformation for Dentsu.
Hey, it works, eh? Hey, I'm CHUGHTAI. I am Global VP of Strategy and Partnerships for MIQ, focusing specifically on video and TV.
Hi, I'm Lexi Riegelhaupt. I lead culture and entertainment marketing at Adobe.
I'm Tara LOFTIS. I'm the president of dermatological skincare at Galderma.
Amazing. I'm so excited about this panel because everybody are experts in all different fields and areas for this conversation. So we're going to really dive into how brands and platforms and media are collaborating, having that cross-platform experience. And again, really highlighting on creators, connected experience, video platforms, gaming, and also just how people behave, right? So like there's scanning, there's watching, there's browsing, and more. So, sorry, let's dive in here. For our first question for the group here, let's talk about next-gen behavior. So kind of for the entire panel here, how are you guys seeing Gen Z Alpha, shaping new norms around media? How are you guys seeing that in your world? Lexi, I feel like that's like perfect for you to chime in.
Sure, of course. I mean, I think the biggest thing that we're seeing is this is a generation that has had a phone in their hand since they could start. So they are mobile first. They are creating everything for their phones. They are watching everything on their phones. They expect you to be on their phones. And so that's something that, we work really hard at being accessible to, but it is the most media aware, creative first, opinion first generation we've seen. So they're not following, they are definitely leading. They are able to be influenced, but they want to be influenced by their community. They don't want you to come in over the top and tell them what to do. And I respect that about them. But then we're also seeing, because they've had a phone in their hand and because all of the ways that they're communicating with their friends and family is on the phone, they're not afraid of technology. They're not afraid of trying new technology. They're not afraid of creating their own technology.
To build onto that, what you said is absolutely true. We're seeing Gen Z and Gen Alpha in particular be the most confident generation in terms of the information that they are able to gather. They are seeking less from their elders, if you will. And what's fascinating from the dermatological skincare space is that because they're so empowered with information at their fingertips, they're on ChatGPT, they're on TikTok, they're on YouTube, they're doing all the research on ingredients and corporate values behind the brands that they're wanting to purchase. And then they're educating their parents and they're influencing household purchases in the way that, as a mature millennial myself, I relied on my parents, my mom in particular, or my pediatrician or my dermatologist for their expertise. But the roles are reversed. So Gen Alpha and Gen Z in particular, we're seeing a real shift in cultural, conversation, and there's a rupture in the way that consumer behavior is operating.
And Tara, I loved what you said there because it segues nicely into data. I know we all love data, we all love stats. And so I loved what you said about that kind of behavior and usage, right? So just kind of for the larger group here, we're seeing 93 to 95% of Gen Z workers, so the slightly, we'll call them older end, that seems weird to say of Gen Z, they're using 2 AI tools frequently. When you look at the younger end, so that sort of Gen Alpha border, 60% of those ages 7 to 14, so exactly what you were just saying, Tara, are using AI tools, and 54% of parents are totally cool with it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's an amazing stat, because the thing is also that in the future, work will be impacted by AI. And we're thinking that 60% of the workers of tomorrow will have to use AI in the way they work. But it's also super important for brands, because when we think about AI as maybe kind of non-Gen Z or Gen Alpha, we're thinking about the lack of trust. But what they have through AI is actually more trust. They trust the AI. They trust the AI recommendation. And I think as a brand, you can't ignore that. And if I have to coin it to something I would call about like trust-centered personalization. So it's not about personalizing anymore. It's really about using the power of AI and not being worried about using AI in advertising, because actually they expect you to. And I think, you know, there was a really nice stats in beauty that said that because of AI, the beauty industry will grow by 10 billion in 2030. So 10 billion of that growth is AI-led.
Yes, exactly. And what's fascinating is that while Gen Z and Gen Alpha trust AI for recommendations, the democratization of information on the internet has made them the most relentless truth seekers that we've ever seen. So they take the AI recommendations as a starting point. So what we see is approximately 60% of Gen Zs are shopping for skincare by showing up in the aisle, uploading a selfie to ChatGPT, then asking for a product recommendation, but they don't stop there. Then they take the top 2 or 3, then they shift to TikTok and see what TikTok is saying about those products, and or Amazon or YouTube, because they accept the recommendation from AI, but they also want to make sure that the people that they follow, the KOLs that they follow, the influencers and tastemakers are also validating that, and then they'll go to the shelf and evaluate and take purchases into consideration. And as a marketer, this completely disrupts the funnel, right? Because then, again, 60% of Gen Zs and Gen Alphas are shopping this way. And the only way that today we can influence ChatGPT is through earned media. So we've respectfully, sorry if there's any PR people in the room, it seems like for the past 5 to 10 years, we've been talking less and less about the importance of PR. But PR has never been more important, because it's every placement that you get that mentions your brand is going to increase the likelihood that your product or your brand is going to be recommended through ChatGPT. So this is a huge focus for us right now.
Well, and I loved all those platforms you touched on. Mo, yeah, I definitely want your perspective on this from a platform standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I love that thought, by the way, that the funnel starts with AI and then moves into discovery platforms like TikTok and Amazon and YouTube. I think that alone could be its own sort of like white paper to put out there, you know?
Right.
I think, look, when we're talking to brands on our side, right, we try to lead with data about the audience. And the data that we see about the audience, first kind of surprising thing is just sort of how old Gen Z and Gen Alpha audiences are. And I think we talked about this right before, right?
Right.
One sort of stat that I just found, you know, just tremendously interesting was 25% of the workforce in the US right now is Gen Z.
Yes.
It'll be 30% in the next couple of years. These aren't kids in college, right? They're not kids in high school. They're sort of out there and they've got, you know, sort of disposable income to kind of to go after. And so I think on the video and TV side, we're recommending a lot more TikTok and YouTube to brands to kind of lean in on the platform side. And we're even talking about the fact that streaming might be sort of a secondary to that, right? Not even a kind of primary or tertiary.
Well, I love that. Actually, I would love to go a little deeper on like the sort of video futures and kind of the world you live in, right? So how are you seeing brands really adapting to that video first world? Because we know Gen Z grew up on YouTube and Gen Alpha, like they're video scrolling. So tell us about that.
So for us, we've been talking a lot about the definition of TV has evolved. And depending on who you ask, it massively varies, right? So if you ask someone in the boomer generation, it's linear TV. X and millennials, right? It's sort of streaming first. And then for Z, it's a bit of streaming and social. For Alpha, it's just social, right? The definition of TV is just social. Mm-hmm. And I think about, my cousins, my little cousin watched a big chunk of The Sopranos on TikTok before he went to HBO and actually watched the series. And so, when we're talking to brands, we're talking a lot about sort of a total video strategy for younger audiences. We're talking about leading with, vertical video to begin with, the importance of creative as part of that, right? Not just kind of trying to repurpose a TV ad for a mobile screen, and then building extension from that, right? So start with sort of TikTok or YouTube Shorts, and then build on from that into streaming environments.
And then Aurelia, from your perspective, being in transformative media, would love to hear your point of view.
So I think for us, it gives brands the opportunity to be emotionally intelligent. And I think it's very important because what you have now is, as Tara said, they're savvier, they make a lot of research, they won't take what you say as gospel, and they expect the brands to be emotionally intelligent and to really deep dive into micro moments. So I think even the way that we define culture is changing, because culture is not those big moments that used to happen on TV. Culture lives in the micro moments, and brands can own a lot more micro moments than there ever was before.
I love what you said, and I feel like Lexi would love you to pick up from that, especially in your world.
Sure. I mean, I think the biggest thing is, yes, we're working in micro moments, and yes, they're watching very small segments of television at the time, but they're still living in one culture. There still is a newsroom. There still is a groundswell of things. They're still living by an algorithm that everyone's is different, but it's centered around a universal data set that we are all a part of. And I think that that's what the daunting thing for brands is like, well, how do I find that one piece of data that I can cling on to? And it's like, no, these are larger trends, and you need to see where you organically fall within those trends. And you need to understand, like for Adobe, music is a huge concentration for us because people signify creativity with music. Do our products make music? No. Do our products make music videos? Yes. Do our products make album covers? Yes. So we can be a part of these micro communities, these micro moments in certain ways. But overall, it's still the themes that we've all been working off of. They like television, they like music, they are interested in beauty. There are certain segments within that, but it is not a brand new world that no one has any idea of how to live within. They just have new technologies to play with.
Something that I think is so critical that we're getting to the heart of, and we don't have the opportunity to have these conversations as marketers very often, is what you were getting at, Mo, which is the fact that previous generations watched linear TV.
Yeah.
The millennial and older Gen Zs are streaming, but Gen Z Alpha is purely social. And so for those of us that are making decisions around content and campaigns, and we have to be so abundantly cautious in our media planning and our content decisions, we can't sit in a silo and come up with campaigns and think that we're going to keep buying media accordingly, because it's already happening. Cetaphil is a brand that's 76 years old. And when I joined the company a year and a half ago, a huge portion of the media budget in the United States was going to linear TV. And surprise, surprise, that was one of our lower performing regions. Whereas JPAC is our highest performing region. India is growing 55% in a skincare category with market growth of 6% globally. And they invest almost 100% in social and streaming. They're a truly digital first ecosystem. And so I'm just saying, this conversation brings to the forefront the fact that we have to begin to plan to adapt our media and our assets probably within the next 3 to 5 years to even move away from what we're creating for streaming if we're serious about winning over Gen Alpha.
Totally. I just think, if you ask someone in the Gen Z sort of or Gen Alpha world, where would you even go to watch linear TV? They don't even know where to go, right? They don't. Their parents don't have a pay TV subscription, and so that world, I think, is completely sort of in the past for that generation. I also think, you brought up, Lexi, a good point around, there are cultural themes that are occurring. Yeah. In some way, it's actually sort of easier with with sort of younger audiences, because a lot of the platforms have transitioned from social graphs between users to more of a sort of a content first element, right? Where TikTok is recommending, more sort of content based on interest to you, and you've got an interest graph tied to you, as opposed to a social graph of your friends. And so I think the natural effect of that is there's more clusters around content that different groups of users are interested in that are easier to sort of glom onto as a market.
To identify. And I think one of the biggest things that is really being able to align yourself to certain creators. Because for us, it's seeing, okay, there's getting a lot of attention around this one creator. Let's start working with them. Let's start partnering with them. So you get them before they're big. If you're partnering with someone for the first time, when they're you look like you're slapping your brand onto something.
Yes.
If you're starting to partner with someone when they're growing and they're building, one, it looks like you actually live in the environment where your community is living. And two, you're getting them as they're figuring out what they want to do and what they want to say. And for us, building creative tools, that's incredibly important.
Yeah, and it's the biggest risk also. Again, working with brands that are more on the mass side in many countries. The second that you sign a creator that's already well known, you're at risk of watching the comment section and people saying, "Oh, congrats, girl, for securing the bag." Not wow, how incredible. Of course, this makes sense. Right. So I think, again, like that's another hill I'm willing to die on. We have to start building relationships with creators and place our bets on who's about to become the next big mega influencers of tomorrow. And that requires spending real time developing relationships, going to coffee, going to lunch with every content creator that you can, and not just relying on your agencies to do that.
Yep.
And then, Lexi, like when you all look at creators, I mean, like you said, Adobe, phenomenal tools. Like you all are just enabling creation into the world. So, like, how do you all team up with creators or partners?
Yeah, I mean, we do it from lots of different ways. I would say one of the biggest moments for us was when we launched our generative AI model, Firefly. And it was a moment where we were going to say, look, our audience may be worried about this. This is about, changing their how they work. And this is something that they may not be pleased with Adobe coming out with. And so our whole message was, okay, then this needs to come from the community. This needs to come from creators about how they're using the products, what's their workflow, how is it informed their process. So it's authentic. It's a real conversation that we were having with them. We also had creators who were not 100%, who were like, I am not sure about this, but I've worked with it. Here's what I like. Here's what I don't like. And so that was when we were like, okay, we're not going to launch with one big moment. We are going to have 150 creators come out and show their perspective, and we are going to find people who are deep in the communities of the sections that we really want to influence. Yes, that was illustrators. Yes, that was photographers. It was also on food stylists. It was also on small businesses. It was also on, it was tying into like, it's very important to understand your product and who should be using it and who they rely on and who they care about. So that was one thing. And then now I think one of the things we do with partnerships is really find people who are trying to push the tech. So like we had one creator, his name was Norman Teague. He came to us and he said, he had a MoMA exhibit that was coming up, and he was like, I want to understand what it would look like if Black creators created some of the most iconic furniture pieces. He's now doing the Obama Congress Library, and he was like, that's what I want to see, and I want to figure out how to use generative AI to do it. So he was able to take Firefly, not using names because it's commercially safe, to say this is what it would look like if Fela Kuti created an Eames chair. I want to see what Firefly is going to put out. I want to see what the prompts are going to look like. He then published all of that. That was a part of the exhibit, and built the chair itself. So it was this moment of like, we want to partner with you because you're doing new things. You're trying to push the tech to where it's not going to go. You're trying to influence. And every meeting we have now is like, what do you want to do with this that's different? And that's always exciting for us.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think a lot of times there's a point of view when whether it's new platforms, new technologies, brands may only hone in on one thing. So I love that you all like, hey, here's this community over here and that community over there, and really, I bet it was really interesting to see what the output was and what the learnings were, right?
Yeah. One thing I would just say, I know I've talked a long, so I will stop, but we're really looking at like functional creators. Like, we're not looking at saying we want someone who's an influencer for just their following. We want people who are functionally creating something and building something, because that not only is authentic, but two, we don't have to push it. You know that this is coming from a real place and people want to learn from them.
So the current face of Cetaphil is Katie Fang, and Katie Fang happens to be here at Cannes Lions right now. I discovered Katie Fang because at my previous role at Kendo Brands, LVMH's beauty brand incubator, our CEO's daughters were obsessed with her, and she was just a really adorable teenager in Canada who was shooting Get Ready With Me videos before she would go to school in her Vancouver apartment, like bedroom, and she blew up, and she's largely credited with starting the Teens in Sephora movement. But because we had listened to Gen Alpha and who they were watching themselves, we started gifting her. Yeah. And I saw that she was selling out products at Sephora regularly. And so when I came to Cetaphil, started gifting her, and she said, hey, we already use this in our house. My mom is a huge Cetaphil user. We all use Cetaphil. And so we ended up signing her because she already had this genuine foundation of love, but she was one of those functional creators that had built huge trust with her following. And the other thing that I will say that's very unique about Gen Alpha in particular, and this is a unique time in history, they are obsessed with humor and comedy in a way that we've never seen before, and I love that, right? Especially knowing Galderma is a science-based dermatology company, so I'm regularly tasked with ensuring we protect the equity of the seriousness of our science, but at the same time balancing out the fact that our highest, most engaged content is always something that creates laughter. And so we have fun with our dermatologists now, creating really fun content because we know that's what Gen Z and Gen Alpha want to see.
I think one of the things that's coming up often with the creator side of the equation is from a kind of paid media perspective. We get sort of queried a lot about premium content and what does premium mean for a brand, for an audience. And I feel like that the number one thing that I'm educating about is premium is personal today, right? It's all about the audience. It's all about the message and the creators that they sort of value themselves, right? And so even if you're on a platform like YouTube, if you're running paid media, it is about sort of what the audience values, right? It's no longer network quality content. It's no longer sort of professionally produced. It is absolutely what the user values.
So, Aurelia?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say it's an exciting time as well to be in media, because I think in the last 10 to 15 years, we all played out of a playbook. We had a playbook for TV and a playbook for search and a playbook for everything else. And now what we have is a playground. And what does a playground give us? It gives us the opportunity to show that media is a catalyst for growth. And I think we don't talk enough about that, about kind of the power of media in changing mindset, in changing behavior, and in building very strong brands. But the way we do it is different because, they want to be curators, they want to be creators, they want to be co-pilots of your brand. And I think the thing that brands need to learn is to let go a little bit of that playbook and work with their audience as creators, as curators, and as co-pilots of what the brands of tomorrow will be.
And one of the things, because there's been little bits peppered through that last bit there, but like really talking about human-centered design and brand expression. So Mo, you just kind of touched on it from a data perspective. So I would love to hear, how are you designing brand experiences that really feel emotionally connected? They feel, I'm going to say the word authentic, but authentic to the audience. So we kind of peppered on that. Would love to go deeper.
Yeah, so I think the Gen Z, Gen Alpha consumer is innately attuned to what they have an incredible, I want to say like a bullshit meter, literally. Like they know what's not authentic completely. And so one of the best examples that I have of this is our acne brand, Differin. And acne care is the fastest growing skincare category in the United States at the moment. And that's proportionate to how fast Gen Z and Gen Alpha are growing in population, right? However, what's fascinating about this is 85% of Gen Zs struggle with acne, but but not. And so in our quest to connect with them authentically, we acknowledged and observed that 90% of Gen Zs are gamers. Okay, so instead of just chasing our tail, like gifting more and more YouTube creators, we questioned the idea, ourselves to think, should we be gifting Twitch creators? Because they also, they're also enjoying skincare. They're struggling with acne, and we're seeing white space. We don't see any other brands playing there. So we started gifting creators. We created a program where we put 2 Fortnite icons under contract. We activated 360 with Amazon and Twitch. And then that was so successful that we tripled down and made a natural integration into Roblox by creating 3 micro games that show up in 5 of the most popular games on Roblox. And again, but it shows up for the Gen Alpha and Gen Z consumer in a way that is not, it's frictionless for them. It's not an ad. It is part of their everyday gaming experience, and we've seen a 7,000% increase in purchase intent, which I've never seen, with all due respect to traditional media buyers, in my whole career.
And it's really living where your consumers live, right? Like you were talking about linear video, no.
Well, I think the other interesting thing is, if you look at sort of online personas for Gen Z and Gen Alpha audiences, you must see this in your data, about half of the audience has a different online persona than their actual persona, right? So they might be, depending on the platform, having different sort of accounts that are tuned to different sort of interest, different interests that they have. And so one of the things that we've done on our side is, we've got sort of a planning tool, Sigma, right, which is all about kind of audience data, pulling out sort of insights into which platforms each audience is in. And I just think leading with that in terms of where is your audience, which platforms, which creators, that is so much more important in a world where a single person might have 3 profiles on a given sort of social platform, right? And that doesn't always show up in the data.
Yeah, and I love the idea of Sigma, just like having that platform, that tool, that go-to, especially like we touched on earlier on, all those connected touch points. All video has a way bigger and multi-meaning now, right? So yeah, really excited about all the work you guys are doing with Sigma. And Aurelia, from a media broad
so
view.
I think it opens up for what we would call kind of next-gen brand experience. And next-gen brand experience is one of playing, shopping, sharing, but also showing yourselves as self-expression. And what does that mean? It means that even in a world where AI is everywhere, AI will never work without the human amplifier. And I think that idea of PI times AI is really where that next-gen brand experience lives. And when we see that 20% of Gen Zs and Gen Alpha are quite happy to buy on social media, I think what it tells us as well is that we need to have that seamless, frictionless integration, because often the time they see the ad and the time they want to buy is just a few seconds.
And I know we're almost at time, so we cannot in the panel without talking about the future, right? So would love to hear everybody, how for this Gen, Z, Alpha, Zalpha, how do you see them continuing to sort of blur the lines as we go forward? I mean, Tara, your example was, great and new. So what else can we expect? How are we sort of mixing it up?
I think there's 2 things that I think we can definitely prepare to expect more of. I think it's this concept that anyone and everyone is an influencer. And even today, our highest ROI programs across all of our brands are large-scale UGC programs. And that was a beta test that is paying off for us, but it's because it is evocative of truly authentic testimonials and before and afters, and it doesn't come across as paid or inauthentic, and that's working. And so we are going to begin to see more of that. We're going to begin to see more and more of our kids and our siblings become content creators. and act as content creators, and that's just going to be natural. And I think we should, within the boundaries that we have with our friends and our families, we should encourage expression. That's my personal belief. We're going to see more and more of that, and then I think beyond that, we're going to continue to see more IRL experiences, so we can connect in person. We're going to see an advancing of clinical science be brought to the forefront, and you're going to see brands that do not have clinical backing begin to talk as if they do, because they're going to try to win over with efficacy for Gen Z and Gen Alpha creators.
Oh, I love that. And then Lexi, like I feel like that's perfect in a future where everybody's a creator and all of those experiences are, beautifully being designed. What does that mean from an Adobe and a tool, empowering creator standpoint?
I mean, it's huge for us. I mean, I will say, like, I agree that everyone's going to be a creator, but I don't think, and I hope everyone's not geared to being an influencer. Because you're seeing now a huge majority of Gen Z is saying that's what they want their career to be.
Yes.
And that's very scary because it's a very small market. We've seen a small group of people become successful there, and that's not what we should be aiming for. I hope that we see that all of them want to become creators and all of them want to express themselves and learn real skills and use tools that are going to help them grow their career, grow their what their ability to do, grow what they're able to create with. I agree that there's going to be much more IRL. People want to engage. People want to see it. People want to touch things. People also just want to be seen and not live behind their computer. And then I think the other thing is really like, how are we going to allow people to step back from their phones? Allow people to step back from just being, constantly fed information to let them play, let them create. Not everything has to be shared out. Not everything has to be, brought into the general world. It's this moment of like celebrating creativity for creativity's sake and looking at new creative skills that are going to help them in the market, not being just a creator, but being a marketer. You have to learn how to edit a video. You're going to have to learn how to build a campaign. You're going to have to learn how to use data. You're going to have to learn at how to use AI. Those are all going to be entry-level things that you need to learn.
I love that. And then Aurelia, from a media standpoint, how do you see the future?
So I think for me, speed is a big, big word. Is like you can't afford to wait 12 weeks to launch a campaign, because in 12 weeks people would have forgotten about you. So it's about that agility, that speed. You need to be first to market. You need to be, the brand that reacts to that moment in as soon as possible, because those moments are very fleeting. And I think, we said in 2017 in our trends that speed would be like what's the most important in the next 10 years, and we happen to be right, because really kind of everything has to happen at speed. They're ambitious, they're tech savvy, they're impatient. If they will not adapt to you, you will have to adapt to their speed.
And now we need Mo to bring it home, especially with Sigma, right? So like all of these different experiences, how do you bring them together? What is, like, from just a tech data standpoint and a consumer standpoint, like, bring us home.
Yeah, so I think, when we launched Sigma, it was really about sort of correcting for all the fragmentation in the media landscape.
Yes.
I think one of the things that, Aurelia, you brought up is it's just hard as a marketer when you need to launch a campaign, get live, run across 12, 15 different platforms all at once. And so what we've done on our side is we've taken all of the major ad buying platforms, connected them with trillions of data points across streaming, browsing, buying. And what we're doing with all that is connecting that into an AI backend, where a marketer can go in and really quickly ask some questions about who their audience is and where they are across each of the platforms, and turn those audiences into campaign activation, not within sort of hours or days, but within sort of seconds, right? And so I just think, like, not to make it a Sigma pitch, but in general, I think marketers are going to need tools that allow them to operate at the speed of their audience. And so that's what we're trying to do. I think I'm excited about the stuff that Adobe's doing on that world as well. And that's the future.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for joining us here at Dentsu Beach. Everyone will be around if you have any questions, connect. And thanks so much for attending.
Thank you.
you.